Hi, Carolyn Banner of Body by Banner, and we are on our last day of the Cut the Confusion course, and we will be talking about vegan and vegetarian diets. So I hope you stick around. We're going to dive into some of the new research that has come out in the last year or two and compare, kind of break down the different types of vegetarian diets so you kind of know the difference between vegan, pescatarian, all the types up to omnivorous diets. And I'll be sharing my expert opinion as a dietitian, registered dietitian nutritionist of 16 years experience, plus I'm a personal trainer and yoga teacher. So I've really been working in the health and wellness field for 16 years, but really focused more on personal training, fitness in the last 5 to 6 with my work coaching women. So I'm going to bring that expertise into giving my opinion on it along with the science. So what's the real deal with some of the science that's out there. And first though, I want to kind of break down gotta get my notes here. What is the difference between the different types of vegetarian diets? So we've got a whole spectrum here. And starting with vegan. So vegan is the most, I would say, limiting, restrictive potentially, and that's where there's literally no meat or dairy animal products. And it's not just usually talking about, veganism isn't usually just talking about a dietary choice. It's usually talking about more of a lifestyle choice. So I think that's important to note, is that for most people, veganism is a whole lifestyle choice. It doesn't just take into consideration the food that you're putting into your mouth. It also takes into consideration the environment, the impact of your food choices on the environment, ethical treatment of animals. It is looking at health and nutrition, of course, but also one thing I think is important to talk about with all the different types of diets when we're going through the spectrum is the personal and psychological preferences that each person has in picking the diet that's best for them. So today, obviously, I'm going to focus in on health and nutrition as my personal area of expertise, but I think it's important to know that when making a choice about what diet you choose, that there's several elements to it, and I just highlighted them again: environment, ethics, so kind of like how other beings are treated, and health, nutrition, and then personal psychological preferences. So we started with the spectrum from vegan to omnivorous diets is starting with veganism. And that, as said, is like limiting all animal products. And there was a really cool quote of from a vegan board. And I loved how they said it. And it was just like, as much as possible and sustainable to eliminate all, to pretty much eliminate cruelty to animals in your food, clothing choices, and medical choices even. So again, really encompasses, I think, a whole lifestyle. As you all are jumping on, hey, from India again, nice to see you on. Please share, I love that. I was just gonna say, please share where you're listening in from. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me and see me okay. But yeah, I'd love to know where you're watching, listening in from. It's really nice because we have folks from all over the world. It's really fun to, I think, see that when you're listening yourself, to kind of know that you're not just watching the screen by yourself. Okay, so veganism is on one end of the spectrum, and then we have vegetarian. And even within vegetarian, there's different categories. We have lacto-ovo, ovo-vegetarian, and lacto-vegetarian. And I'll explain what those are. So those are kind of like the Latin names to differentiate the types of vegetarian that there is. When you say lacto-ovo, lacto stands for kind of lactose-based or dairy products. And so, hi. So lacto stands for dairy products. So lacto-ovo and ovo stands for eggs. So a vegetarian who is a lacto-ovo vegetarian will include eggs and dairy products into their diet. A person who is a lacto-vegetarian will just include dairy products and not eggs. Someone who is an ovo-vegetarian will include eggs, but not dairy products. So it kind of helps you differentiate. If you see those terms, they're just the Latin derivatives, what those things stand for. And then from there, so we got vegan, vegetarian, of which there's categories between lacto-ovo, lacto, or just ovo. And then we have pescatarian. And pescatarian is honestly just like a vegetarian diet. Either it could be a vegan diet with fish or seafood added, or it could be a vegetarian, like a lacto-ovo vegetarian diet with fish and seafood allowed as well. And so it's a bit more liberal again, and it oftentimes people include those because they find that they need a bit more nutrients than they can get, or it's just more convenient sometimes to have the allowance of fish and seafood. And also because they provide omega-3 fatty acids and some other important nutrients. And so, of course, like I said, there's a lot of reasons why people choose different few but sometimes that's a few of the reasons. But a pescatarian diet does not include poultry or meat. And then the most liberal diet, of course, is the omnivorous diet. You might have read a few years ago, Michael Pollan's book, The Omnivore's Dilemma, and I think that really brought to light kind of this concept of the different range of diets, having an omnivore's dilemma, a diet, which includes everything and kind of the choices that brings with it. And, also, again, on the other side of the spectrum, a vegan diet. So today we're going to highlight vegan and vegetarian diets, so those plant-based diets. And it's funny almost because yesterday we were talking about keto, and paleo's still really hot in the diet world. And so it can kind of come across, I feel like sometimes, depending on who you follow in social media, of course, like who are you listening to in your newsfeed. And it might seem like there's like less and less plant-based diets, or it might seem like there's more and more plant-based diets. So it kind of depends on who you're listening to, but there's, I think, becoming almost more extremes of paleo, I'm using this side as for vegan, so vegan and really plant-based, pro-plant-based, and then the other side of it is like paleo, keto, lots of meat, more the primal diet. And I feel like people are getting really entrenched in their camps. And so today my goal is, again, to share some of the science, to share some of the studies that have been done regarding plant-based diets, because I do believe that there's a lot of benefits to them. But my kind of takeaway, kind of like little like a disclaimer before, is that I believe personally as a dietitian that yes, there's a lot of things that go into our decision to have a diet or what diet that we choose, but that nutritionally, health-wise, that as long as we are emphasizing plants and living foods as the basis of our diets, and I think that almost all of us could have more plants in our diet, that no matter where you fall on the spectrum from vegan to paleo, that you can probably have a healthy diet if you're really emphasizing and eating just a shit ton of vegetables. So if vegetables are the base of your diet, whether you choose to eat meat or not, then I think you can have a healthy diet. Again, there's a lot of religious and other, sorry, had a phone call coming in on the Instagram live, so I had to cancel that so it wouldn't cut the recording. So it really comes down to making the best choice for you, and hopefully this can help inform that decision for you. Okay, before we get started, I still want to hear where you're listening in from, so don't be shy. Please, I'd love to just have you write that in the comments. And then also do me a quick favor. Do you follow currently any kind of vegetarian diet? Or if you just are open to sharing any kind of, like, what's your type of diet that you're following now? And if in the past, so what's your current diet, if you're willing to share, and if in the past or you've ever tried a vegan or vegetarian diet. I would love to hear that. So if you just can put that in the comments while I go on to some of the science, I would love to hear that. Sorry, my throat is still getting over this cold. So have a quick sip. Okay, so let's dive into some of the studies. You guys are being shy today. Wait, here, let me make sure that I haven't missed the comments. Okay, so there's been some interesting, I love, so I get this journal magazine, just a second, not journal, but a couple of magazines as a dietitian, and one of them that I really love is the Today's Dietitian. And for example, and you can get it too, even if you're not a dietitian, and they recently had one, and I have it on my table back there because I was using it to look up articles about recent research, and they were summarizing the benefits of the plant-based diet, and there were so many recent articles, and they were basing it out of this conference that was recently done in Loma Linda, California, which is actually one of the blue zones. So if you're not familiar, the blue zones are where there's a higher rate of centenarians, so people that live to be at least 100 years old. It's also an area where there's a Seventh-day Adventist community, and they follow a plant-based vegetarian diet. And so it's just interesting that this area, that's a blue zone, is also very predominantly plant-based. So they had this conference there, and they were breaking down a lot of the new research on plant-based diets. And of course, like in my mind, I'm like, okay, they're already biased because they are people that are gung-ho for vegetarianism. So, I always have to filter that through as someone who's reading the research. But that being said, you can't really ignore the literature, the studies, if they're quality studies that are randomized controlled trials, and then meta-analysis that have looked through years and years of research and seen the trends. And some of the meta-analysis in particular were seeing improvements in cardiovascular outcomes following a vegan diet. We're really decreasing the risk of cardiovascular disease versus an omnivorous diet. So again, there can be a whole spectrum of a vegetarian vegan diet. One that could be more of a carbitarian diet, I call it, where it's really heavy on carbs, like processed carbs and all that, and cheese if you're a vegetarian that's lacto-ovo, and not really having much of like plants. Actually, it's not actually a vegetarian diet, it's more of a carbitarian diet. Can anyone relate to that? I mean, like, I've seen it so many times as a dietitian where people come to me and they're like, I follow a vegetarian diet, and I'm like, okay, cool, what do you eat? And they share what they eat, and it's like pizza, cheese pizza, and bagels and cream cheese, or these kinds of things. And so it's not really a vegetarian diet, it's more of a carbitarian diet. And I get it, because that's like what's convenient. And so I just keep that in mind, that some of these studies that are looking at, we don't know necessarily the exact quality of what the vegetarian vegan diets were. Some of them we do. Some of them that there was more of an analysis of the actual nutrient intake of what was in the diets. Another article that was really interesting that I want to just highlight was the Journal of the American Heart Association looked at a decrease in inflammatory markers, CRP, following a vegan diet versus the traditional American Heart Association diet, which includes meat in moderation, decreased sodium intake, decreased saturated, and no trans fat. But even though, like the Heart Association diet is supposed to be like this great diet for cardiovascular health, they found even more benefits, especially for decreasing inflammatory markers, with the vegan diet. And the theory behind it, again, is that, like I've said before, like the more plants we can get in that more living, like nutrient-rich food, the better, because that's going to protect us against inflammation and against diseases. And so that's sort of the theory behind it with the vegan. And please, yeah, I see a question in, and I'm going to just read it really quick. Yeah, junk food vegans, yep. And if you have any questions, please put them in the comments. I'd be happy to answer them. I definitely will answer them, actually, but I might have to wait till the end, just so you don't interrupt too much. Another one I want to highlight was, sorry, I'm looking at my notes. Oh, this is a great one from the European Journal of Epidemiology in the last year. It was that an increase, so they wasn't looking at just like the extremes of vegan and omnivorous diets. They were looking at more of like a range of a more plant-based diet, or one that was more heavy on the meat and dairy products. And so the more plant-based diet the individuals in the study had versus the ones that had more meat, the ones that had more plant-based had a much lower risk of developing insulin resistance and prediabetes. So that risk factor for developing adult onset diabetes, type 2 diabetes. Excuse me. Hopefully my voice will hold out from this cold. Another huge, so the articles I was looking at recently, though, that the magazine I showed you was highlighting, was related to this huge study that's been ongoing. So there's been 2 phases of it, and that's related to the Adventist health studies. And it's similar to, like, there's been NHANES, nurses studies, physician studies, and what they're doing with the Adventist health studies is because there's a huge population available that follows a plant-based diet. Little note, though, they also do not smoke, and they encourage physical activity, and they always emphasize a day of rest on Sunday. So it's a whole, religious recommendations, similar to other religions that have dietary recommendations or rules. But with the Adventist religion, Seventh-day Adventist religion, they are vegetarian. And they minimize even, I think, dairy products and eggs, and they really de-emphasize sugar and sweets. So, there's a lot of things going on besides just not eating meat. So I think that's important to note about the Adventist health studies, that they have a lot of other potentially health beneficiary aspects to their lifestyle. But the first leg of the study was from 1974 to 1988, and in that they found that nuts were associated with, like, increased consumption of nuts was associated with preventative cardiovascular disease, having more plants, like a higher plant-based diet, was really linked with a higher life expectancy. Again, that centenarian blue zone relationship. And then having more meat was associated with increased cardiovascular risk. And that whole grains were associated with a decreased colorectal cancer risk. So they repeated these studies, what they found in these studies, also in a nurses and physician health studies. So I thought that was really interesting. So they took that and they were able to find within a more diverse population too, that there was a correlation between decreased consumption of meat and increased consumption of plants and nuts and whole grains, that in those populations as well as having benefits. And then now there's an ongoing leg two of the Adventist health study that started in 2002, and it's still going currently. So they're still looking at it and the long-term benefits of a plant-based diet, because it's a great population to look at. But I think it's interesting though to know, there's a lot to take into consideration for our health and disease prevention. It's not just diet. There's lifestyle factors, and they tend to seem to have other healthy lifestyle factors too, like a lot of movement, no smoking, very minimal alcohol intake, and incorporating rest. Okay, so that's some of the current science that's been out there. Excuse me, do you guys have any questions? I know it's kind of, I wanted to like highlight it, but also not get too heavy into to the science a bit. Next, I want to talk about, so we went over the types of vegetarian diets, like the whole spectrum from vegan, lacto-ovo, to pescatarian, to omnivorous. And one thing I forgot to mention is there's kind of more recent one in the last 10 years called the flexitarian diet. And I think this one is becoming more popular, as just vegetarian diets in general have become more popular in the last probably 50 years. And that's where people occasionally include meat, poultry, and fish. And they maybe primarily follow a vegetarian or vegan diet, but then will occasionally say, either because of health reasons or for social reasons, to join with the family at Thanksgiving, and maybe they'll have some turkey. They're not like adamantly against it, but they won't have it as often. So I think that's important to note. And that term, just a little quick thing was just fun, was coined by a dietitian like myself that's here in Chicago, Dawn Jackson Blattner. So she's cool. I've seen her speak and have her book actually. So it's basically trying to emphasize, right, all the benefits of eating a more plant-based diet, but not being super, super rigid about it, both for, your psychological personal preferences, as well as, maybe health reasons in order to get a little bit more nutrient density of B vitamins, iron, and protein from meat sources. And maybe also just for social reasons too, to kind of be able to join in on some of the festivities with families and not make a big deal. And it is okay though, if you truly believe that you need to follow a vegan diet, that you speak up for yourself and you voice that, and and you say what you need. That's totally fine. I think that's an important thing. And sometimes people are a little bit shy about speaking up for what they believe in and for what they want to have in terms of their nutrition, whether it's for losing weight or whether it's for following for religious reasons or health reasons, whatever. It's important to speak up for what you truly stand for, and to not be shy about it or to apologize, just to say, and then go with the flow too, right? I think there's two sides of it, like speak up and also go with the flow as much as you can. Okay, some key nutrients that I think we need to really take into consideration when someone is thinking about or following a vegan, vegetarian, or pescatarian diet. And in terms of these nutrients, it's even more important the further you get to just like true vegan diet, because that is where you really aren't getting maybe trace amounts from dairy products, eggs, or fish, if that's something you're including. And that is B12 is the top nutrient we really have to be aware of if we're having a more plant-based diet. And if you're having a vegan diet, it has to be supplemented. There's no natural sources of it really. And so either need to take a supplement with B12 or have foods that are with supplemental B12 in it. Some cereals, I believe, have it, and they have a bit of added to it, but you really have to take like a supplement that contains B12. All right, I'm losing my voice here from this cold. Right. Oh, I love this. Okay. I just saw another question come up. Cool. Keep the questions coming, by the way. Please, and you guys still haven't, some of you haven't shared where you're listening from. I know some of you have joined in. Please share in the comments where you're joining in from. And if you have any questions, I'll definitely be sure to get to them. And there was a question that I saw by email right before I jumped on about satiety and vegan and vegetarian diets. So I'll make sure to get to that if my voice holds out. So another nutrients that are important that are really rich in animal-based products or foods, and that's zinc, iron, especially heme iron, which is more easily absorbed in the body, calcium, and vitamin D, protein, and omega-3s, especially if you are eliminating fish products. You can still get it from other places, but it's just not as easily absorbed and not as abundant. So those B12, zinc, iron, calcium, vitamin D, protein, and omega-3s and iodine, as well, are the top nutrients that I say are, you really need to have like your finger on or your thumb on, whatever you say, and to make sure that you're paying attention and having a smart vegetarian diet. So again, right, like not having a carbitarian processed breads and easy to consume things, but having more of a truly plant-based vegetarian diet. It's because it can really take more effort. I think this is where, some special considerations we talk about. It takes a bit more effort to follow a healthy vegetarian diet. So it just takes a bit more time, a bit more planning and thoughtfulness. So I think that's important to note and to be willing to account for it. And if not, also to be aware of the fact that maybe you need a supplement if you aren't always able to be kind of really diligent about having a really varied vegan diet, to make sure that you're also supplementing, getting in that B12, getting in the iron that you need, having a calcium supplement, taking some vitamin D, using flaxseed oil and lots of walnuts to get in your omega-3s, and being smart about getting lots of leafy greens for calcium, getting broccoli, it has to be something where you're really being focused on getting a lot of variety in order to not run the risk of being low in those nutrients. It's not impossible though, so I want to say that. So if it's something that you're really excited about, and I would love to hear too, like, is anyone really considering or already following a vegan or vegetarian diet? Let me know in the comments. And if you do you do anything to make sure that you're getting all your nutrients? And it's okay, no shame here. I'm just curious, if you are, like, are you really interested in it, and do you have questions about like supplementation? So what I mentioned before is that it takes a little bit more consideration, and we can all, I think, stand to eat more plants. So for me, the big takeaway has been, as someone who is an omnivore, my big takeaway from these studies is that it just reaffirms to me how important plants and the plant-based diet is. So for me and my family, what we choose is to have a primarily plant-based diet, but also include meat, like thoughtfully procured meats and animal products that we eat, preferably free, ones that are free range. No, the mail just came. Free range, organic, and not consume much of processed meats, if any. And to include a lot of sustainably sourced seafood and fish. I honestly think I could be a pescatarian, and I would be, but it's just easier, honestly, for our family, and we've made that choice. So we do include some other consciously and sustainably sourced animal products. And for me in particular, I think I really feel better when I just try and eat a vegetarian diet. Oftentimes, even when I'm doing it really thoughtfully, I think, and including good sources of plant protein and having a lot of vegetables and not really overdoing the carbs and not having a lot of processed foods, I have a hard time staying full. I have a hard time maintaining my satiation, like being satisfied for a good amount of time and having really good energy. So for me, I don't know if it's my blood type, my genetics, and it's, again, putting it through the filter of me. I've found personally that following a truly vegan or vegetarian diet is really difficult for me. I have more cravings, I have more hunger, my energy's not great, and at least a little bit of animal protein does seem to help for me in my body. Cool, thank you for these questions. Awesome. Yeah, if you're jumping on, let me hear where you're listening from. But yeah, so okay. Okay, I'm gonna get to your question, Megan. Thank you so much for putting that in. So she was asked a question about whether vitamins and supplements actually get absorbed. And I want to jump though right now to the question that I had from Ellie, and she emailed me and she had a question about satiety. And so she was saying that even though she eats a lot of fruits and vegetables, and I believe she's a pescatarian, but that she has problems with satiety and staying full. And so I want to go over that really quickly, and then I will get into the question about vitamins and supplements and absorption. And the question about satiety, so again, going back, like, we can have a really shitty omnivorous diet, or we can have a really shitty vegan diet. And so it all comes back to, like, what's the quality of our diet? Are we being intentional about what we're putting in our body? And like I said, we can all, I think, do with getting more fresh, live vegetables and fruits into our diet. And so with the pescatarian diet, and in terms of like satiety or vegan diet in general, I always want to look at, like, what's the sources of your protein? Because a lot of time it can be a little trickier to get in quality protein sources. It's not impossible by any means. You can definitely get enough protein in and get enough in to sustain. I think this was a question that somebody else asked me too. Is it possible to, I think Cynthia, you had this, to sustain muscle mass with a vegetarian diet? And yes, it is. And again, at the end, I'm going to kind of highlight again those questions that you need to ask yourself to know whether, put it through the filter of you to know whether it's working for you. But in general, yes, it can totally be. There are some like ultra marathoners and athletes and Olympic athletes that follow a vegetarian or even vegan diet and do amazing. I think, again, you have to be intentional about getting in the plant-based protein. So beans, lentils, legumes, some from nuts and whole grains, but not a whole lot. It'll be like trace amounts, right? We get a little bit of, it's like you get a little bit from vegetables and from grains, but really the main sources in a vegan and vegetarian diet, especially if you're not including eggs and dairy products, which will provide protein, pretty rich sources. A more vegan diet, you got to really rely on those beans and lentils and legumes. The thing with that too, or if you're pescatarian, you can get protein from fish and seafood, is that sometimes I see a lot of times people are comparing a couple of things with the protein thing, because protein is a huge part of satiety, is that it's like just at certain times. It's not included at snacks, for example, and so you might be snacking on fruit and that's it, and so then you're not really feeling satisfied, or you're just having a few veggies and not feeling satisfied from that. Or maybe your breakfast doesn't have much protein at all. Those are usually the sources where it's like either you're not having it spread out enough and we're concentrating it more at lunch and dinner, or another thing that can be happening is that we're kind of like carb loading with the protein. So carbohydrates and legumes, lentils, they do provide a good bit of protein, but their primary macronutrient is actually carbohydrates. When you break it down, like the biggest percentage is carbohydrates. And so we have to take that into consideration in terms of like building out the meal and pair those carbohydrate-rich protein sources with lower carbohydrate vegetables, I usually recommend. And not maybe having your beans with rice and sweet potato, which, I've seen that, right? Like I've seen like even tacos that have like sweet potato and beans, and you have rice on the side, and you have the tortilla, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is like a carb fest. And so if you're having your beans, which you do need, and lentils for protein, to pair it with a lower starch vegetable, so those ones that are above ground, like leafy greens, broccoli, cabbage, all the cruciferous vegetables, peppers, zucchini, all of those are going to be lower carb sources. And so you're not going to be just like totally carb loading, which will spike your blood sugar and then usually cause a drop, even if you're having like pretty rich fiber sources with it. So being mindful of what we pair those carb rich protein sources of beans and lentils with, and I would recommend pairing them with more low carb vegetable choices and not just layering carbs on carbs on carbs. And then just to be mindful of what are the getting in enough healthy fats from nuts, from avocado, from things like olive oil on your dressing or your salads and things, or vegetables. But you don't want to overdo the healthy fats, but a little does go a long way in terms of like maintaining satiety, helping you stay full for longer. And then one other thing too, in terms of satiety question, was to look at your sources of carbohydrates that you are having. Are you having like processed carbs that aren't really rich in fiber? If you're having like a plain bagel in the morning, or just regular bread for your sandwich that has, you know, lots of vegetables on it, but you're not maybe getting in a lot of good soluble and insoluble fiber from either whole grains or from root vegetables as your source, that could be a thing, right? If it's more of a carbitarian processed diet, junk food, vegan, that Megan called it, versus a true vegetarian diet. So that's another thing to look at for in terms of satiety. So really getting them that protein spread out throughout the day, making sure you're not carb loading to have a huge spike in blood sugar and then a drop. So you're really pairing the beans and lentils with a lower carb vegetable, and then looking at your sources of carbs, trying to really minimize the processed things like pretzels and like bread products, bagels, flour tortillas, all that, you know, that are easy, totally get it, but can kind of fill up and not really leave you satisfied. Usually just makes you more hungry. Okay, so I want to jump back to Megan's question and ask about, I've heard that vitamin supplements don't really work, that our bodies don't absorb them. Is that true? What do you all think? Do you guys take supplements? Give me a thumbs up if you take supplements. And I would love to hear in the comments if you think that they are worth it. Like, do you think you actually absorb from it? It does depend on the quality of the supplement and vitamin that you're taking. But I do believe that a plant-based supplement, like for example, I take Shaklee supplements that are plant-based, or of course I'm gonna like forget there's all sorts of reactions going on there. What is the other one? Oh, Juice Plus, that has its plant food-based supplement. Those I do believe you can absorb quite well. And if you can take it with food, it's recommended, because then you actually are gonna have that transporter for the vitamins to be absorbed better, especially for fat soluble vitamins, to have it with food, as well as, like, for instance, iron. If you're having it with food, especially something that has vitamin C in it, you're gonna absorb that iron a lot better. There is this thing too, though, that can be a problem of supplements that have everything in them and then they compete for absorption. So for example, iron and calcium will compete for absorption. So you really, if you're looking at like a multivitamin and it has iron in it, you probably, if you need to supplement your calcium, you want to do that apart. You want to do that at a separate time, because it won't really absorb both of them. I think iron would beat out calcium. I'm not sure who would win that who would win that fight in your bloodstream. But yeah, so that's probably a little bit of what maybe the concept around that could have been. But yes, there are some, though, that aren't. So here's the thing with supplements, they're not really well regulated. And so we don't always know that content is accurate. There's been clinical trials done on the Shaklee vitamins that I take, so I have more confidence in that. I also don't take them all the time. I usually take, for instance, I take the multivitamin with iron. It's recommended for women. I take that around my period, like during my period and right after, because I know that my iron stores are being depleted. I don't take it all month. I take it for like 7 to 10 days. And then I take vitamin D during the winter because of Chicago. And then occasionally, like when I'm sick, I'll take more vitamin C or like elderberry syrup or oregano oil, some additional things, but I don't take just supplements for supplements, because I really focus on getting a variety through my diet. So that's the number one recommendation, is that we try to achieve those nutrients from our diet and not from a supplement. We can't rely on them, and they actually have not been proven to have any positive improvement in health outcomes, because what the improvements are seen are through the plant-based real consumption of those nutrients from food, not from taking a supplement. They're really helpful, I think, for with example, like a vegan diet, of preventing a deficiency or replacing nutrients once they become deficient, and to help get them back up to normal. But the goal is always, always to try and get it from your diet as much as possible, all the nutrients. So I hope that helps. Let me know if you have any other questions on that, Megan. But thank you for that question. So Cynthia, you had asked me in the Magic Makers Movement group coaching page about about following more of a vegetarian diet, and she's gained more muscle recently because she's been working out like a badass and lifting heavier weights, and that's awesome, and not wanting to lose those gains by switching over to more of a plant-based diet. Like, I think you've just been kind of being more pulled towards that. I forget your other reasons, Cynthia, but I don't want to speak for you. And I totally get it. I've been feeling more pulled towards a vegetarian diet, and I'm not worried at all about losing my muscle tone. And I think that the thing that we need to be is smart about it, right? So continuing to be thoughtful about where you're getting your protein from, excuse me, and having, I think, again, not just isolated to lunch and dinner, which is like a huge issue, especially in North America. And I would argue too, like in Argentina, for those of you listening from Argentina, some in Europe, where we really get a lot of our protein at lunch and dinner and not hardly any at breakfast, and not very much with snacks. It's like we grab convenience foods, we're on the go, and a lot of times those are poor in protein. So if you're switching to more of a plant-based vegetarian diet and you're looking for protein, I would say, like, I recommend, using the plant-based protein powders and having that as either part of your snack option or breakfast, or if you choose instead for lunch. And that can be a really nice way to make sure that those meals that can often get skimped a bit on protein, that you're getting enough, and that you're not going to be kind of turning to your own protein stores, your muscles, to produce the protein that you need. And oftentimes we don't need tons and tons of protein. Sometimes we eat more protein than we need, or it's recommended from trainers or from people who are recommending, dietary advice for losing weight. They're recommending more protein than what you really need for just maintaining muscle mass, even adding muscle mass. But they recommend it because it can, like I said, help with satiety. It helps you feel fuller for longer. And it's just harder for your body to break down. And so you digest it more slowly. So usually people are recommending, eat more protein in the diet and fitness world for those reasons, not necessarily because we need it physiologically. So you should be good to go. If you make sure that you're getting it at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, a little bit with your snack at least, if you're having a snack. And then also keeping in mind, I think, this idea of, if you're going to be having more beans and lentils and things, to push out some of the other carbs that you're having, because those will provide a good bit of carbohydrates. And just to keep a nice macronutrient distribution and not overdo it with the carbs in order to get your protein, to pull back a bit maybe on potatoes, tortillas, rice, and cereals, breads, those things that can really add a lot of carbohydrates. Does that make sense? Does that help answer your question that you had? Please let me know. I know, and a lot of times, like, if I ask you guys to respond, it's like so delayed on Facebook. Yeah, I don't know. So I really appreciate, I just want to say thank you so much. When you ever comment, hit like, if you share this live, like now, if you share it on your page that you're watching this, anything like that, super helpful, please. I just appreciate it so much, because that's exactly how Facebook works. It just, then your friends will see it, and they don't want to show small business content in the newsfeed unless it's been kind of verified that people are interacting with it. So I always appreciate so much. And also, it's just kind of awkward to be standing here talking to the screen without any response. So I always appreciate when you guys give me that interaction. It really helps. All right, so let's wrapping up. But yeah, Cynthia, if you're on still, I'd love to hear if you have any other questions about that, or Megan too, if you have any questions about the supplements. I'm losing my voice here, so let's wrap it up. One little thing before I do was that Fernando, it was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. I'm gonna be talking about vegan diets this week. So Fernando always stays on top of the news sources in Argentina, Latin America. I think I was on InfoBay. I don't know, InfoBay, and he showed me this article, and he's like, there's this woman that's an Instagrammer that's been like huge into the vegan diet for years. Her name's Raw Vanna, and so she's like raw vegan. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, how do you even do that? Like, you can, but it's just like, it's like a full-time job to be raw and vegan. And so she's been, like promoting these products, doing these detoxes, 21-day things, and she got outed by her friend. Accidentally put a video up, and she didn't edit it carefully enough, and you can see her eating fish in the background. This Raw Vanna, raw vegan Instagrammer who's been like so pro vegan for like years, and she had to come clean that she's been eating fish for a year or something like that. I forget exactly the details on that, but she had to start including fish because she lost her period and she was like having a lot of hormonal disruption and just her energy was bad. And so her doctor was like, you need to start eating some fish or else, you know, your health is going to decline even more. And so she wasn't being honest with her followers about it. And I just want to just say that and to remind all of us that what you see sometimes on social media isn't exactly honest always. You know, people are like, look at my amazing meals and all this amazing, you know, like I'm so clean eating, and it doesn't always tell the full picture. And so just, you know, to be, you know, do a little investigation and don't like look at what they're doing and override what your own symptoms or experiences are because you think it's so good because they're saying it. Don't ever lose that internal voice of yourself. You know best. You know your body best. And if there's one thing I hope you take away from the end of this course is that filter of you that I just have referred back to a lot. So come back to that filter of you. You are your best. You are the expert in you. I'm not the expert in you. That Instagrammer sure as hell is not the expert in you. And you know how you're feeling and how your energy is and how your hunger is and how your cravings are and how your symptoms are. She had symptoms and she had to address it. And so, you know, I just think that's interesting. And so that's, I think, the special consideration. We didn't really get into it, but especially if you're pregnant or breastfeeding or trying to get pregnant, or have a history of disordered eating, this is an area where when we get super strict or fixated on being really regimented, you just, again, got to be careful with it. It can kind of tip into that psychological effect where it's kind of becoming more of a burden and can cause more strain, especially if you've had disordered eating in the past. And then also like with just pregnancy, trying to conceive and breastfeeding, we really need an abundance of certain nutrients that are often hard to get in a vegan diet. So it's not that you can't be vegan, but that's when you really need to step up your A game and just be really on it. Work with someone. I would recommend either working with a dietitian. Definitely let your doctor know. Make sure that you're taking prenatal with iron and B12, and just be really conscious of the fact that you're going to lose out before the baby does. You're going to lose out on those nutrients and have problems before the baby, and just the way that the hierarchy of life is. But you want to take care of yourself and just really think through whether it might be the best choice right now, and pay attention to how you're feeling, and do it really smartly if you are going to go vegan. Okay, so let's finish up with that and just review a little bit of the filter of you questions, because I think that's helpful. Everything we've gone over this week, whether it's been intermittent fasting, whether it's been high intensity interval training classes like Orange Theory, whether it's been keto, we've gone from extremes of keto and paleo all the way to vegan. And so today I want to just leave you with those questions of, do I even like this? If you're following a vegan vegetarian diet, and I know that doesn't need to necessarily be the only marker, especially if you're doing it for religious reasons or more ethical, moral, and environmental issues. You know, like I think there's a higher calling a lot of times with the vegan diet. And so I get it, you know, like there's a lot of benefits to it. But I also want to give you that opportunity to really kind of take stock of whether you really enjoy it. Is it sustainable for you? Again, not looking at it as a fad diet to lose weight or to do something drastic, but to really think of it as a lifestyle choice. And then again, coming back to the biofeedback, what are those clues that our body always is giving us and that we can touch into? And that's hunger. Are we having more hunger, or is our hunger ravenous and out of control, or is it more like manageable? What about our energy? Is our energy stable and optimized? Is it feeling good, or is it just like a roller coaster ride? Our cravings, are they really like a high demand, super annoying, persistent, or are they kind of like subdued and like chilled out? You're obviously going for more of the chilled out on that. And then the last thing I think is important is, again, the psychological effect. Is it causing you to be more obsessed and like micromanaging every detail and losing out on the rest of your life? Or is it giving you more freedom and energy and feeling really good by making those choices to be vegan or more vegetarian? And lastly, you know, too, if you're doing it for health reasons, if you're looking at cardiovascular improvements, if like decreasing your cardiovascular risk, like with your lipid panel, follow that. You got to know those numbers and then follow it and see if you're having changes, benefits. If you're not, then, reevaluate over time and do other, make sure you're getting movement and stress reduction, all those things too. But I think it's important to give some quantitative evaluation to what we're doing as well. So make sure you're getting your vitamin D levels checked. Check your iron levels, especially for women. And if you're doing it for more cardiovascular protection, having your lipid panel checked. Those are important things. And if you're doing it for weight loss, then again, look at the changes over time, right? Because we'll always see fluctuations in our weight, but look at the changes over time. If you're looking for weight loss and you're not seeing that trend down, then maybe something needs to be tweaked. And maybe it's not exactly the right thing. Maybe we need to figure out a little bit better way to do it. Or maybe you do need a little bit of fish or animal meat, animal protein in your diet, and that helps you function a bit better and achieve the results that you want. So, just trying to aim for choices that are really sustainable and quality. So I hope this information was helpful for you. Hopefully you've gotten a bit more clarity. That's my goal, is like to not give you more information, at least not tons of information, new information, but just to kind of highlight the kind of key points from what's out there, from the science, really base it on science, base it on and filter it through my 16 years of experience and help you kind of get the important points of it so that you can look at whether for your life it's a good fit. So hopefully with the different topics we've covered, you've gotten a bit more clarity and you can be more confident then about what you want to choose, like to really take on. So if you didn't get a chance to already, I included the link to, did I put it here in the comments? Or maybe I didn't. Okay, let me add it here. To join the course, the email list, so that you get all the replays and the special bonuses. I'm going to send them out. So even if you miss the first few days, no worries. I'm going to make sure you get access to the whole playlist of all the replays and all the bonuses that I've already shared with the ladies from the beginning of the week. So make sure you add your name and email to that for free. And in that, you will get special early and discounted access to my brand new coaching program, the Whole You coaching program, which is a 12-week course starting on April 8th. And it'll be working with less than 10 women. So there's limited spots and women are already interested and jumping on calls with me to just chat and see if it might be a good fit. I will be sharing more details about that. But if you're just like, I'm interested, or like, I want to just make sure that I kind of get a placeholder in there, even if you maybe decide it's not the right fit for you, get your spot. And also it will be giving you $100. Sorry, my brain is so slow right now from the school. It will be giving you $100 off enrollment. So that's always a nice thing to grab onto. So we'll be working together one-on-one, and it will be actually the only way to work with me one-on-one over the rest of this year. I'm really focusing in on this small group and one-on-one coaching. So it'll be less than 10 women. All together, we'll do a group video call on Zoom every other week. And then on the other off weeks, we're going to be you and me jumping on the call for 30 minutes to go over your specific questions, your specific goals, and creating a plan for you. And that will be, so you'll have 6 one-on-one calls with me, plus 6 group calls. And each week we're going to have a theme. Each week we're going to be breaking down, nutrition 101, getting really basic at the beginning and creating a lot of awareness. So like what's working well, what's not. So that awareness piece is huge, to really know where you're at right now. And then give you tools and a little bit of structure at the beginning to kind of, know what to do in the grocery store, know how to plan and meal prep so that you have a good plan in place and a bit of structure so that you can start to and then tweak from there and get more individualized to know for you what's the best kind of map for your life to have the most healthy and just energetic life that you want. And some people have goals that are going to be weight loss, and others will just have goals that are more focused on having really good energy and improving their health. And so both of those can align in this program and you can see those results. So about half of the women that I work with have a fat loss goal, and the other half have like, I want to just be really clear. I don't want to be like searching anymore. I want to know what I should eat and feel really confident and good about that choice and just going with it. So all the details about Whole You coaching will be coming out soon, but those of you on the Cut the Confusion course email list will get all that early and discounted access, get $100 off enrollment. So be sure to grab that, and I'll share all that with you soon. All right, my friend, have a wonderful weekend. And if you have any other questions, please shoot them my way. If I missed a question that you had, please send it to me by email or in the comments here. I will make sure to get it and answer you as soon as possible. Have a wonderful day. Bye.